When it comes to trolling, you often look for a comment or phrases that are designed to incite a reaction, okay? Whether that's anger or embarrassment or shame or guilt, whatever it is, or something that's aimed at making you think they're superior, you're inferior, and so on. Maybe look for things like exaggerated language or offensive language, things that can be overly aggressive and maybe out of context to what the actual discussion is. It's got nothing to do with the discussion. They've just crowbarred something in to make it look, to try and make it fit there. So have a look at some of the language that they're using. If you get a sense, a lot of time your gut feeling is going to kick into gear here. If it seems that they're trying to elicit some kind of reaction from you, chances are you might well be right. Even if it's not overly offensive or overly aggressive, if they're asking you questions that have got nothing to do with what you've said, or as I say, they put up a post or they make a comment that's got nothing to do with the subject, or they're trying to intellectualize, they're trying to show, as I mentioned earlier, how much more superior they are or how inferior other people is. But one way or another, pay attention. They might just be trying to get some kind of reaction from you, okay? Something else to pay attention to would be, for want of a better term, maybe suspicious profiles. Now, this is the thing about the online world. There is a lot of anonymity. And I don't really have a problem with that, because some people are maybe just trying to keep themselves safe. They could have stalkers out there. They could have ex-partners out there. They could have people out there that would make their life a misery if they knew some of the things they were saying. I've really no problem with anonymity. On the downside of that, there are people who will exploit the fact that you can go online with an anonymous profile. The trolls and the predators, they might have a profile that looks like it's brand new, maybe a couple of days old at the most. Okay, they maybe have one follower and that's themselves. Okay, so these profiles tend to be made up. It might just be a blank profile. Sometimes you might get some kind of generic photo, a nice picture of a field or something. You might even have a photograph of someone else. It's not them at all. Maybe these days AI can create it, or maybe they just take a picture randomly from somewhere, claim that that's them. When it comes to a predator, the predator would be different. As I say, the troll is desperately trying to get some kind of engagement from you. But a predator might use some kind of fake persona. They might seem overly polished. And I said about using false images, they might even use, as I say, stolen images. But one way or another, they might use these fake personas. They might pretend to be someone else. What you might find as well, and you'll find this with both trolls and predators, they will spam a lot of threads. They will message a lot of people, sometimes even in the one chat thing. Okay, again, could be things that are irrelevant, but they're largely repetitive. What you might find, if you're finding repeated patterns, you'll find this with predators. You might get a message, especially someone who has been in some kind of distress, they've been through something, they're talking about how they've struggled. You will get a message, how are things for you now? I hope things are okay now. And that sounds okay, and the person could well be genuine. But what you might find, if you have a look, that same person and that same profile has been messaging several people in the one conversation, hoping someone is going to engage with them. Either that, or they might keep trying to steer discussions towards your personal details, talking about inappropriate topics, asking for maybe private details from you, even private contact details. What you sometimes find as well is, if you were open enough to say, no, I'm not giving you my details, that's when they can become very mean and nasty. Okay, that's when they can start using derogatory language, maybe threatening language, things like that. They're not getting what they want. I wouldn't even say that's a sign, that's an indicator. I would say that's actually proof. Okay, you're dealing with a predator. Trolls will target pretty much anybody, anywhere they can try to get any kind of contact, any kind of interaction. Predators are different because they tend to focus on people they would consider to be vulnerable. Now, that could be young people, that could be older people, that could be people who are in some kind of distress, illness, trauma, whatever. They will target people they consider to be vulnerable. Sometimes excessive flattery, promises of this, that, and the other, promises of rewards, maybe, sympathy, a performative kind of empathy, okay? Your gut feeling might tell you it's not that they're being nice, they're being overly nice, or maybe pushing the agenda. And if you look closely, you might find they are messaging lots of different people So watch for comments, I guess, that would be very overly personal, things that might seem manipulative, more kind of coercive rather than persuasive. Regardless of what you put out there, you might be dealing with someone that they don't really want to engage in good faith, which is why if you respond to them, they start a debate, they ask you a question, they'll dodge the question, they'll twist your words, they'll use fallacies, they will do whatever they can to frustrate you rather than discuss something. Your 5-word question might get 47 paragraphs worth of an answer. And just the fact that you're reading that absolute bollocks is feeding their ego, because you're engaging with them. So you do get bad faith actors, if you will. It doesn't matter what your response is as long as you're responding. Even if you respond with anger and frustration to them, they're still getting something from it. Predators would be different. Even though they are engaging in bad faith, they can be more charming. As I say, there's that feigned empathy and so on. There can even be a feigned expertise, okay, just to try and gain your trust. They know what you're talking about. They have been through what you've been through. They know someone and this helped them. If you want to talk to them privately, they'll tell you how to help yourself and so on. It's very false, okay? If you're reluctant or if you're hesitant, pay attention as they pursue it. Because something else has just come up, just something else I'm thinking is you might get a lot of likes on almost everything you do. It's the same person. Doesn't matter what you do. You could be saying you had toast for breakfast and they're liking it. There's a lot of interaction. They're commenting or liking everything you do. Trying to gain, build some kind of familiarity with being overly friendly, overly nice, overly supportive, and so on. And as I say, predators tend to target people that they consider to be vulnerable. Trolls, on the other hand, they will target everybody, okay? They might send the same message, the same things to multiple people, but still trying to provoke some kind of reaction. Again, it's either to annoy you, it's to amuse themselves, it's to try to get you to do something for them, whatever, or just to disrupt whatever the conversation is, because you could have several people and they're talking about, they'll be talking about the weather, they'll be talking about the movie that was on television last night, they could be talking about anything, and they just keep on trying to disrupt it with something completely irrelevant, just to annoy and frustrate. Whenever they're challenged, again, that's what you're talking to a troll, looking at these interactions, these unusual ones, and then the bad faith interactions. If you were to challenge them, you give them a new piece of information, or you give them a perspective they hadn't considered, or even if you just give them facts, okay, hard reality, they tend to double down. A vague claim, not necessarily evidence, but they might talk about it as if it is actually fact. Going to be a lot of anecdotal stuff, but they will talk about what they think as if it's actually evidence. Predators, on the other hand, they're going to talk about something typically, and I'm talking about the Machiavellian, the more the very manipulative type people that are really good at coercing people. They might do or say something and be able to avoid verifiable details. They'll be able to avoid giving details about themselves. They will keep interactions very ambiguous, but they can do it in a way that kind of keeps you hooked, where it's almost like you're doing the work and you're trying to get more information out of them. Tell me more about that. That sounds really interesting. That sounds really helpful. And the more you're doing that, again, the more they're pulling you into their world. If you think of a narcissistic person in a relationship in those early days, presenting themselves to be the very thing that you think you need, the very thing that you find attractive, the very thing that you admire, they start to morph into that. And the predators online would use the same kind of tactics. They become the very thing that intrigues you. But a lot of what they do is ambiguous, and it's ambiguous for a reason. The predator, by using that ambiguous information and questions and little comments and so on, trolls, they want instant reaction, which is why a lot of their stuff is very poorly thought out. They just react to things. They just say things to get a laugh, to get whatever it is. Predator can be more gradual, okay? There can be more of a strategy. That's why I say they're more Machiavellian. There are tactics. They have an end game. So like I say, it could be liking your pictures, your comments, innocent comments, agreeing with this, pointing out that, showing a feigned empathy, and that's when they try to escalate it to get your information. If they just jump into your personal messages thing straight away, There might be something in that, something a bit suspicious, which is why you might get little gradual things like comments, likes, and so on before they start sending through messages like that. It's the thing about predators. Don't forget about predators. Predators are very sneaky by nature, and sometimes they can be very good at making themselves look as if they are badly hurt and wounded to try to elicit your sympathy in the hope that maybe you'll message them or you'll like their stuff or you'll comment on them. So it is worthwhile paying attention to those things. I found it interesting when I was researching things like online trolling, stalking, and so on. I found it interesting when I was looking at the research. There is a component to that which is actually loneliness. The thing is, what they found in the research is there is a dark side to loneliness. It can breed things like resentment. Okay. A lot of the trolling behavior, what you might find is there's loneliness is behind that. This is going to sound unkind, but bear in mind, I've been on the wrong end of many a troll. If you're lonely and you want to make friends or you want to have some kind of contact, positive contact, antagonizing strangers is probably not the best way to go about it.